Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. Thanks to everyone who is joining us online. We appreciate your participation. I won't go through the litany of rules, but do please remind yourself to mute your microphone when you're not speaking and check Nellis if you need any additional information on the meeting. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Senator Neal.
Oops. Here.
Senator Neal.
Here.
Senator Hansen.
Here.
Chair Dondero Loop.
Here. Thank you very much. It appears that we are all here. So as I mentioned, I won't go through the housekeeping items today. We do need to be done by 5 o'clock and we have 4 bills we're going to hear. So if you do not have some information, please don't hesitate to reach out to the legislative staff. We're going to go slightly out of order with the event at 5 o'clock that several of us need to be off and on to another meeting. So we're going to start with Senate Bill 77. And with that being said, we will open up the hearing on that bill. And hang on. This measure is a Public Lands Committee bill and revises provisions relating to public bodies. And Senator Goycochea, when you are ready, will you please proceed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you can hear me. Again, I'll wing this for the Public Lands Subcommittee on Public Lands, but this bill pertains to all public bodies presently have the ability to obtain cooperating agency status by signing an MOU with the federal agencies, and that includes the Native American tribes as well. The problem is that these elected officials that enter into the MOU, which is truly a confidentiality agreement with the federal agencies, then in order to avoid violating the open meeting law, only a staffer or one of the elected officials can be in attendance as they go through this process, the pre-decisional process on determining an EIS or an EA, a number of those policy decisions that are typically done under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. And I just want people need to understand that these elected officials are the public's representatives to an otherwise closed process. And what this bill does is would open it up that would allow that members of that public body to attend one of these closed meetings without violating the open meeting law, but with the full understanding that before they could make any decision or determination, they would have to come back and present it in an open meeting. The problem is right now you end up with one commissioner or a staffer attending these closed meetings with the federal agencies. And I think it's unfair to the other commissioners and as well as the public, because typically you're only either getting a staffer or one elected official's opinion and guidance in this process. So what SB 77 attempts to do would be to allow a waiver or a change in statute that would allow the open meeting law to be waived in these cases where you had an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, and you were given cooperating agency status. And that's long and short of it. I know there's some representatives here from Eureka County that are truly engaged in this and possibly other areas, but the long and the short of it is just a waiver to avoid the open meeting law when you have been granted cooperating agency status through an MOU with a federal agency. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee members, any questions, please? Gee, Senator, it looks like you explained everything.
No, Senator Orenshaw has.
There's Vice Chair Orenshaw. Please
If
go
you
ahead,
want
Vice
information,
Chair.
you probably better wait till the next group. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Goicoechea. What is the current issue with the law as present, with the open meeting law being applicable? I mean, I'm not sure I understand the problem we're trying to solve here with the exemption, seeking an exemption from the open meeting law.
Presently, if more than one county commissioner attended that meeting, or this NEPA or EIS meeting, if they attended it, and because it is sworn to confidentiality, but if they attended, it would be a violation of the open meeting law. Because again, they have to have a posted open meeting if there's 2 or more county commissioners there. And that can't happen because this is, it's a closed session with by the federal agencies.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator, would this only pertain to certain counties and certain instances? Other entities, I don't know, school board trustees, whoever from other counties, could they use this law as well, or is it only certain entities?
Well, I believe it would apply to any public body, but again, I don't know what the circumstances would be where, say, a Clark County School District would be meeting with, say, the Bureau of Land Management or the Forest Service in a NEPA, an Environmental Policy action. But no, I think it's clearly intended, or at least I would think the Public Lands Committee would intend this to be extended to any public body that has entered into this memorandum of understanding with a federal agency for this pre-decisional determination and to be involved. It's already an accepted practice with the federal agencies that you, by signing an MOU, you can be granted cooperating agency status. And like I say, that extends to the Native American tribes as well. But clearly they aren't bound by the open meeting law, where any public body here is. And that's the problem. If more than one representative of an elected board sits on that, in most cases, it would be a violation of the open meeting law. And that's all we're trying to do, is allow them the interaction with the federal agencies as they go through these processes without running the risk of being in violation of the open meeting law.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additional questions from members? I'm trying to scan to see if I see any hands up. Okay, well, if there are not any additional questions, then we will go ahead and hear our testimony in support. Reminder that we will have 2 minutes, and if you have anything else, you can submit it in writing. Go ahead, broadcasting, when you're ready.
Chair, the public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Is there anybody in opposition?
No, Chair, you have no callers at all in the queue.
Mr. Tibbetts. If you'll, there you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're actually speaking in support.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Jake Tibbetts. I'm the Natural Resource Manager for Eureka County. And also you can see our County Commission Chairman, Mr. JJ Goicoechea, is on the line as well. Eureka County, we were the ones that put this proposal together to the Public Lands Committee and identified some of the issues related to that. NEPA in Nevada, having so much public land, virtually everything that we're doing has some nexus to the federal agencies and often requires some NEPA process. One thing I want to address is that this bill in no way undermines government in the sunshine. It doesn't allow backdoor deals. At least that's not the intent. The intent is to allow those that are elected to represent their constituents to have an active participation, know what's going on, and then to be informed of what's going on. There's a whole bunch of background related to what is a pre-decisional and deliberative process. That's all been defined by the courts. There's a lot of federal law, but one thing I want to make clear for the committee is that the federal regulations and rules require a county or any other public body that meets that threshold to be a cooperating agency. They must, according to federal regulations, sign an MOU. And they must, in that MOU, outline or sign that they will not disclose any of this pre-decisional information. So to have these meetings as a public meeting where you're posting agendas and under open meeting law and having minutes and all that, the BLM or the Forest Service or any of these federal agencies simply cannot have that meeting according to their rules and according to the Freedom of Information Act. I'll also note that the document, so all this happens, then it becomes a public document, the EIS or the EA or whatever it is. That starts the public process. Everybody can see that document. Everybody can see what went into making that, and everybody has the opportunity to weigh in at that point. That's where a county would then go on the record in a public meeting, and they're not bound to that. It's now become a public document. And they can go on record outlining their issues, concerns, or anything else they have with that. So again, it's not done behind closed doors. And then we did put a packet of information in. I cut and pasted the various federal regulations word for word so you can see what we're up against in their requirements. I've also cut and pasted language from various MOUs that Eureka County has had to give you an understanding of some of the federal language across a broad range of federal agencies. And then the final document on our handout is a letter from the Bureau of Land Management where our county commissioners in a public meeting were speaking about their concerns about a mining project and some of the water use. And a local reporter put it in the newspaper, and the BLM got a hold of that article and sent us this letter, basically, telling us we were going against our MOU and we were disclosing this information. So it gives you a real world example of some of the things that can happen. And final thing I'll say is if this bill doesn't pass, it should be clear that it'll be the status quo. What will happen now, as Senator Gocochea has pointed out, is that staff or limited county commissioners will be informed and aware, and others will be cut out of the process. And we just don't think it's right for appointed staff that are not elected and representing the people are the ones representing a county's interest. We believe those elected to represent those interests need to be those at the table with the federal agencies. And I can take any questions that you'd have.
I appreciate that, Mr. Tibbetts, and I see your letter, your exhibit here with us. So thank you very much. I think what I'd like to do with the permission of the committee is go to Commissioner Gocochea and hear your remarks and then go back to see if we have any questions. I recognize that we sort of went out of order, but we're just moving along here. So Commissioner, you have a famous last name from one of my favorite senators, so please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my younger brother there, Pete, for making our name so famous down there. You did not go out of order, ma'am, in all honesty. Jake Tibbetts is probably one of the smartest people when it comes to NEPA and cooperating agency status that there is in the state of Nevada. I want to begin with saying that not every county has a Jake Tibbetts, and we are very fortunate that we do. We probably provide more comment and more feedback as a cooperating agency than probably any other county in the state of Nevada, and it's because of that gentleman that we're able to do that. But that brings me to the point of why this bill is needed. If Jake were to seek other employment or something were to happen, there is not going to be a continued line with the Board of County Commissioners. I couldn't step in and pick up, and neither could any of the other commissioners step in and pick up where he left off on a lot of these processes, because he is our point. Now, there are times where him and I work together on a lot of our natural resource issues, and that isn't fair to the other commissioners on the board, if you will. They really don't know. We can't disclose with them what kind of conversations we are having with those agencies. If we were, we would actually be conducting a meeting because we're a 3-member board. If 2 of us were to have a conversation or I tried to talk to them about what was happening, we would again be in violation of Nevada's open meeting law. And one other thing I want to bring up is elected officials change, just like staff changes. Someone loses an election, chooses not to run again, and they are that county commissioner that is the point for BLM, Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. There is no continuity there, and that isn't fair to the electorate of our county. I think that they deserve better. And again, we're not trying to do anything behind the scenes. Right now, again, we do a really good job when the comments are done and finalized in the public process. We bring those forward, but we have absolutely no way of bringing that forward and across that dais in our meeting room, or we would be in violation, as Mr. Tibbet said, of the MOU that we sign with these various federal agencies. So in light of time, I know you have a lot of stuff and a hard stop at 5 o'clock. So Madam Chair, I'll stop there. And if you guys have any questions, Jake and I will be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Before we go back to phone call support, is there anyone else, Senator Gocochea, that needed to speak on behalf of the bill?
No, Madam Chair, I don't believe so, not that I'm aware of, and I'm sure glad I'm the younger brother.
Well, hey, take it for everything you can take. All right, I apologize for the disconnect there, and I'll go back to broadcasting and ask them if there's anybody else in the queue for support. You know what?
Chair,
Hang on
there
just a
are.
minute.
I'm sorry.
Hang on, broadcasting. I apologize. Committee members, is there anyone that has a question of those 2 gentlemen? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, broadcasting, go ahead. I'm sorry for the interruption.
We are currently in support of SB 77. If you'd like to testify in support, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 280. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, this is Colby Prout, COLBY PROUT. I'm here on behalf of the Nevada Association of Counties, NACO. I'm their Natural Resources Manager. NACO represents all 17 of Nevada's counties. I would like to speak in support of SB 77. This law will encourage and enable full and transparent cooperation between counties and federal management agencies, and give county governments and their residents full and fair representation regarding major plans and projects affecting their communities. SB 77 will simply reconcile attention between federal and state sunshine laws. Specifically, under the Federal Freedom of Information Act, agency deliberations in the beginning of the NEPA process are privileged and remain confidential in order to encourage frank discussions between cooperating agencies. Meanwhile, Nevada's open meeting law would require these discussions to happen in public. Without SB 77, federal agencies will continue to avoid deliberating with county commissions because Nevada's open meeting law requires that any such discussions be open to the public in contravention of a privilege under federal law. While it may seem as though this bill encourages secrecy or lack of transparency, in fact, it does the opposite. Currently, federal agencies engage in the planning process under the National Environmental Policy Act do not engage in deliberation with County Board of Commissioners. Instead, they're forced to engage with unelected, appointed county staff members out of view of the public and without accountability to voters. The underlying importance of the exception in SB 77 is to ensure county governments and their constituents are properly represented and protected when an agency is engaged in a large-scale project within a county by allowing agencies to deliberate with the elected County Board of Commissioners. just as the OML was amended in recognition of attorney-client privilege to permit a closed session during county commission meetings, this law would amend the open meeting law in recognition of federal agencies' pre-decisional and deliberative communications privilege to allow a closed session during county commission meetings. For the reasons just described, NACO urges this committee's support of SB 77. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Caller with the last three digits of 728. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Dondero Loop and members of the committee. For the record, this is Marla McDade Williams here today I'm with Strategies 360 and here today on behalf of Churchill County. My name, M-A-R-L-A, McDade, M-C, capital D-A-D-E, Williams, W-I-L-L-I-A-M-S. Testifying in support of this measure, Churchill County has 3 commissioners and only one member could attend a session at a time. The member carries issues forward to the best ability of the member, but the integrity of the process can lose some value if that member isn't able to carry forward the concerns of other members of the commission. As noted in previous testimony, the final deliberation of the county is done in a public meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair, and that concludes my testimony.
If you recently joined us, we are testifying in support of SB 77. If you would like to testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no more callers in support at this time.
Okay, we will go to opposition.
To testify in opposition of SB 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in opposition at this time.
Okay, I do understand that we had some people that were trying to get on.
Chair, I have someone who just raised their hand.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 130. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 130.
Yeah.
Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon. This is Christine Saunders. I'm the Policy Director with Progressive Leadership Alliance in Nevada, CHRISTINE SAUNDERS. I will mention before I start, many of us received a different meeting ID when we registered for this meeting, so there should likely be a number of other folks calling in here shortly. I am here in opposition to SB 77 and want to just speak briefly in addition to the comments that we submitted for the record along with a number of other groups. It's important for directly impacted communities to be involved in the environmental planning process as early as possible, particularly for mining projects, and to have access to how and why decisions are made. NEPA proceedings are already difficult for the community to figure out how to participate in, and often the local public body will be the primary conduit for the public to be involved in such a proceeding. It is inappropriate to exempt public bodies from the government transparency laws, and it limits the public's access to processes that impact their land, their water, and their communities. We ask that you oppose Senate Bill 77. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else in the queue?
We currently have more callers coming in. Chair, I will give another announcement.
Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead. I just wanted to check. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Currently, we are testifying in opposition of SB 77. If you would like to testify in opposition, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits of 792, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 792, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
This is Patrick Donnelly, Patrick I'm Nevada State Director at the Center for Biological Diversity. We are opposed to SB 77 as it violates the spirit of Nevada's public transparency laws, which are essential to maintaining the democratic ideals of the state. Counties and other public bodies have participated as cooperating agencies in NEPA proceedings across the country for decades without the need for creating new gaping exemptions from public transparency laws. More than one county commissioner cannot participate in a meeting with any party, regardless of whether it's a closed NEPA meeting or not, without adhering to the open meeting law. A meeting with federal agencies, particularly on topics that have such a large impact on the environment and communities, as something, for instance, for an environmental impact statement, should not be an exception. As to the idea that the public has transparency at the time a draft EIS is put forward, by that time the cake has been baked. Substantial changes almost never occur beyond the draft environmental impact stage, so the input of public bodies before the draft has been prepared is the critical moment. And if multiple county commissioners or other entities are participating in those meetings, the public has a right to know what's going on. In sum, the balance of competing interests must fall on transparency. At worst, it seems that it is somewhat inconvenient for public bodies at this time. If so, they should ask the federal delegation to pursue revisions to NEPA and FOIA statutes in favor of more transparency, as opposed to trying to throttle transparency at the state level. Thank you for considering my comment, and there was technical difficulties getting on, so hopefully, I know a number of other parties are interested in this bill. Hopefully they'll get through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to, for those that are trying to get on, please dial 669-900-6833. And the meeting ID is 931-9664-8821. And while we're giving people just a moment to get on, Vice Chair Orenshaw, you had a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to keep it brief. For Mr. Donnelly, if this were to pass into law and this exemption from the open meeting law be granted across the 17 counties in Nevada, how many of these NEPA discussions do you think would now not be subject to open meeting law? Is there any idea how much of that's going on across the 17 counties? Madam Chair, maybe we lost Mr. Donnelly.
Yeah, maybe we lost Mr.
The
Donnelly.
question. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Chair, could I respond to that just for a minute to Vice Chair Orenshaw? This is Senator
Sure.
Gorky.
Please go ahead.
Senator Orenshaw, it wouldn't make any difference. It would be the status quo. It would limit the participation. Right now, they already have the ability as a cooperating agency, and so it would continue to be very limited cooperating agency meetings going on as per the MOU. And Mr. Donnelly's right. If there is a change, it probably should happen at the federal level. But until that happens, this is a venue to allow the public to participate in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Goicoechea. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll go back to you broadcasting. Is there anyone else in opposition, please?
We are currently still in opposition of SB 77. If you would like to testify for SB 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 807, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Richard Carpel. That's Karpel. Executive Director of the Nevada Press Association. We represent Nevada's newspapers, local news websites, and magazines as well. Nevada's open meeting and public records law, they're not perfect, but they set high standards for government transparency that benefit the citizens of the state. Senate Bill 77 would import federal secrecy rules to override those standards in order to keep all NEPA proceedings hidden from the public. Do we really want to farm out our transparency standards here in Nevada to the folks in Washington, D.C.? Given their record in these matters, we think it's an extraordinarily bad idea to do so. As a practical matter, it would mean that when federal agencies leading NEPA proceedings hold meetings or issue reports about the environmental impact of massive projects in Nevada, the citizens of the state will be left in the dark. We will have no ability to determine whether the underlying NEPA process was conducted with the interest of Nevada citizens in mind, nor will we have the ability to hold public officials accountable if they are not. For these reasons and others that have been articulated today by my colleagues and will be coming up, the Nevada Press Association strongly opposes Senate Bill 77. And thank you very much for considering our perspective.
Thank you very much.
Caller with the last three digits of 695. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 300. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. This is Maggie McCletchie for the record. My last name is spelled MC, capital Letchie, and I'm here today to testify on behalf of the Nevada Open Government Coalition. And I appreciate all the help that with trying to get these call-ins handled. There were some issues, I will say, with trying to access, for the public to access this hearing about open government. I want to point out that the important democratic principles underlying both the open meeting law and the Nevada Public Records Act don't change. And it does, the fact that our government officials are supposed to work for the taxpayers and the public does not change just because Nevada is working with a federal agency. This would set a very dangerous precedent that would allow, that would start opening the door to getting rid of our fundamental principles of openness and transparency just because a Nevada agency is working with the government. We've heard a lot today about the fact that this won't undermine transparency because we'll have government officials there to work on behalf of the public. But both the NPRA, the Public Records Act, and the Open Meeting Law, in fact, reflect that the public has the right to know what its own government officials are doing. They don't need to just trust the representatives. They get to hold their representatives accountable. Finally, there's been a lot of talk today about the challenges of the open meeting law. I don't think that there should be an exception to the open meeting law, but none of the arguments made today explain why the changes to the Nevada Public Records Act would be necessary. Under current Nevada case law, if a document truly is subject to the pre-decisional common law privilege, a government agency can and does withhold that record. That's limited to when the interest outweighs a significant need or the presumed interest in access, and that's the correct law. There's no need to create a huge gaping hole in the Public Records Act for Nevada's environmental work with federal agencies. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much.
If you just joined us, we are recently in opposition of SB 77. To testify in opposition of SB 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits of 662, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Kyle Roerink, Kyleroerink. I'm the executive director of the Great Basin Water Network. And, I want to echo what has been said as it relates to the foundational principles of our government. But I also just wanted to note that local governments are between a rock and a hard place as it relates to these issues. To participate as a cooperating agency, largely they have to silence themselves to just bring an inside track of information, and that is not a good thing. But I think again, going back to those principles of transparency, this is not the way that we should be fixing the process right now. A bill that results in less transparency is not the solution here. And I think as it relates to pre-decisional and the deliberative process, there are lots of documents that would not be subject under the FOIA laws from not being able to be out in the public. And I'm concerned that this bill would do that in Nevada, where there are a number of documents that you'd be able to get your hands on that you would no longer be able to. And so, I think the solution here is much bigger than this legislative offering right now. We need to ask the federal government to take the muzzle off under NEPA and to change the FOIA laws. I think that's the real fix. This is not the solution. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We are currently in opposition of SB 77. To testify in opposition of SB 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
And you are all welcome, if you are in the queue, to say ditto. If you agree with others that have said.
Hello.
Caller with the last 2 digits of 695, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. My name is Holly Wellborn, HOLLYWELBORN. I'm the policy director for the ACLU of Nevada. 4 times the charm trying to call in. Very interesting that all the open government folks are having such trouble getting in to provide public comment this afternoon. I won't repeat too much of what my colleagues have just said, but we wanted to register our opposition to SB 77. Our laws in the state of Nevada, the spirit and the purpose of our open meeting law and our Nevada Public Records Act is to foster a level of transparency that is better than that's provided by the federal government. By providing this new exemption, we are just moving in the wrong direction. So for the reasons stated by my colleagues and the reasons presented today, we oppose this legislation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your persistence.
Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Would you please go to neutral?
Testify neutral on SB 77. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. And we will close the public testimony. And thank you very much for this discussion. And we will now move on to Senate Bill. Hang on. We will now move on to Senate Bill 39. And I believe that Treasurer Conine, you may be available.
Hello, Chair. Just confirming, did you want to start with 47?
I apologize, Treasurer Conine. I apologize. And can you stand by for just one moment? And we're going to go to Senate Bill 28. and I apologize. This measure revises provisions of the Nevada Code of Military Justice.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Remus, State Judge Advocate for the Nevada National Guard. I'm here today to provide testimony and to answer questions regarding Senate Bill 28 from the Office of the Military. With me is Ms. Nikki Randall, the Joint Forces Headquarters Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. Our goal is to provide some background on the Nevada National Guard, discuss the background and context for the proposed revision, and outline why this revision is in the best interest of the state, the Nevada National Guard, and its service members. The Nevada National Guard supports a dual-hatted mission and answers the nation's call for overseas contingency operations, as well as domestic response assistance within the United States for both the federal government and the state of Nevada. Guardsmen can be called at a moment's notice by the governor of Nevada or activated into a federal status. Members of the Guard commit to military training 1 weekend a month and 15 days each year in their respective military occupations and career fields. When we are activated into federal service, Guardsmen will often deploy for periods ranging from several months to a year or longer. When activated by the state of Nevada, the lengths vary depending on the incident and situation. The Nevada National Guard includes roughly 4,000 uniformed personnel, with the Army component being larger than the air component of the Nevada National Guard. During the past year, the Nevada National Guard has been deployed overseas to multiple locations for its federal mission, has assisted and continues to provide significant assistance to the state for COVID response, supported local law enforcement during the civil unrest events of last summer, and sent troops to Washington, D.C. to support the security mission for the presidential inauguration. SB 28 amends a section of the Nevada Revised Statutes to modify provisions of our Military Justice Code, specifically concerning the punitive provisions of the state Military Justice Code. Violations of the punitive provisions can subject service members to varying degrees of discipline. The purpose of the modifications being proposed here are to strengthen the Nevada National Guard's efforts to support the Adjutant General's goal to eliminate sexual harassment and sexual assault in the Nevada National Guard. One of the main priorities for Major General Barry is to ensure that all service members in the Nevada National Guard are treated with dignity and respect. Sexual harassment is clearly contrary to that goal. It is not tolerated in the Nevada National Guard. At the present time, sexual harassment violations are generally disciplined under NRS 412.563. Disorders and neglect prejudicing good order and discipline. This is what we call our general article that is used when a specific punitive provision does not cover misconduct. Misconduct covered under the general article is often not punished as severely when compared to a punitive provision. By adding a specific punitive provision for sexual harassment, commanders have a more effective tool for disciplining a service member who sexually harasses another member. This addition of a punitive provision makes it absolutely clear that violations of sexual harassment will be punished under the Military Justice Code. The second part of our proposed amendment will align our state Military Justice Code with Department of Defense policy, mainly DoD Directive 6495.01. This alignment helps in several ways. First, these amendments provide more clarity as to the definition of sexual assault. In doing so, the legal analysis for determining whether a sexual assault has occurred is simplified. Second, these amendments also allow law enforcement agencies and the National Guard Bureau's Office of Complex Investigations to determine whether a sexual assault has occurred as defined by the Department of Defense, as opposed to only looking at Nevada criminal statutes. It is important that the agencies that conduct sexual assault investigations on our behalf are using the correct legal standard to allow us to pursue disciplinary action. In conclusion, SB 28 will better facilitate good order and discipline in the Nevada National Guard while promoting several of the Adjutant General's command priorities. It is in the best interest of the state to adopt this bill into law and help the Nevada National Guard continue to build a safe environment for our soldiers and airmen that is free of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Thank you for your consideration of this bill and your support of the state's military. And Madam Chair, I'd like to give Ms. Randall a chance to make a few comments as well.
Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Karen Nicole Randall, or Nikki Randall, as Lieutenant Colonel Remus introduced me. I am a captain in the Nevada National Guard, and I am employed full-time as a civilian with the Nevada National Guard as the State Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. I manage the State Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program, the SAPR program. I'm responsible for developing and managing that program. And I also serve on the National Guard Bureau Sexual Assault Task Force, which includes members across all the 54 states and territories. The goal of that task force is to identify areas where we can focus prevention efforts and identify prevention tools we can adopt or create to address these areas, which are used nationally as well as here in Nevada. Specific to SB 28, over the last year, the Nevada National Guard has seen a significant improvement in the implementation of our equal opportunity and sexual assault prevention and response programs, addressing sexual harassment and sexual assault in Nevada's military population. Both programs have conducted significant awareness campaigns to ensure that all military and civilian employees know the definitions of sexual harassment and sexual assault and understand their options to report these behaviors. These efforts have resulted in increased rate of reporting, and Major General Berry has made it clear to all members of the National Guard that these behaviors will not be tolerated, and that he will hold each individual accountable when an investigation reveals they are guilty of these offenses. The proposed revisions strengthen these efforts. These issues are not specific to the Nevada National Guard and are part of a larger conversation about making the military a safe place for all service members, regardless of rank, gender, sexual orientation, or race. The revision to NRS 412 to include sexual harassment addresses the statistics presented in the DoD's 2019 annual report on sexual assault in the military, and that report showed that as many as 50% of military sexual assaults were preceded by sexual harassing behavior. This inclusion recognizes that the only way to eliminate sexual harassing or sexual assault is by first intervening in and ending sexual harassing behavior. The revision to NRS 412 definitions of the consent and sexual contact provide consistency between the Nevada definitions as well as the Uniform Code of Military Justice of the United States and the United States Department of Defense definition, which reduce confusion and provide consistency across the forces. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for your consideration of this bill and your support of the state's military, and we're both standing by for questions.
First and foremost, I want to thank both of you for your service. The National Guard has been absolute godsend for this COVID pandemic that we've been through in assisting all communities. So thank you so much for all of that. I have some questions from the committee, and I will start with Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a question on section 3. Well, there's two parts. In the first part of section 3, it seems like you guys struck out the part where I guess it could be a third party or a person acting as an agent for another individual who could have caused a non-consensual contact. You guys struck that out, and I was just wondering why, because it happens, well, it looks to me like it happens at the very beginning of section 3, and then also in section 3B.
Someone causes non-consensual sexual contact. So, Senator Neal, this is Ms. Randall. So the proposed definitions are word for word the same definitions used in the Uniform Code of Military Justice and in the DoD definitions. So I do see, yes, there was that prior definition there of someone causing someone else non-consensual sexual contact. And Colonel Remus, maybe you can speak a little more on this. The way I've interpreted it and the way it's interpreted by other agencies of the DoD is that when it talks about that intentional non-consensual sexual contact, it doesn't matter who is causing it to happen. If it occurs and it's non-consensual, it's covered by that definition.
And Senator Neal, this is Lieutenant Colonel Remus. Yeah, what we tried to do, as Ms. Randall stated, was use the DoD definitions. And as you can see in 4A, we crossed out non-consensual as a defined term and went with consent instead. So that had us take out non-consensual as well.
And I guess the reason why I was asking was because when you strike out, like in 3B, line 34, when you strike out intent, intent legally is where you form the REA to do the act. And so I just wonder, legally, how do you go in and then establish that a person either intended to do? I guess you're saying by any form, whether or not you had formed the intent or not, you are still guilty. That's where we're going.
I mean, if Senator Neal does, in line 18, we still have engage in intentional sexual contact with another person. So we still have the intent element there.
Yeah, I saw that. It just seemed, it was just incongruent when it got to the third party, I guess, the way I was reading it. But it's fine. I think it's a good first step. I mean, clearly it's 2021 and we're trying to, deal with sexual harassment. So I guess it's about time.
Thank you, Senator Neal. Additional questions from the committee on this bill? If I'm missing you, holler. Okay, I think that the only question that I had that I was wondering about is who is, and just for my own knowledge, in this situation, who is actually responsible, aside from anybody who might witness or might be involved? Is there anybody else that is responsible for reporting this?
Madam Chair, yes. We have responsibilities as certain designated positions would be responsible, but also it's a command responsibility to report. Another policy that General Barry wants to work on is a more clear policy about who must report, because right now it's a command responsibility, and he wants to expand that to include more people than just commanders and leaders, and that's going to take a little bit of time to develop that policy.
Okay, and the reason I ask, because I'm an educator by trade, and so we are mandatory reporters, and so I just was checking on that. All right, if there are no other questions from the committee, we will hear testimony in support of Senate Bill 28. And as a reminder to all testifiers, please keep your remarks to 2 minutes. And broadcasting, when you're ready, you may begin with support.
To testify in support of SB 28, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to opposition.
Chair, I had one caller raise their hand right at the end. I believe they may be in support.
Please go ahead and include them if we need to.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 300. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
There I go. For the record, my name is Tony Yarbrough. That's spelled Y-A-R-B-R-O-U-G-H. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee. I represent nearly 6,000 members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the Department of Nevada. I also represent close to 500,000 members of the United Veterans Legislative Council as an officer. United Veterans Legislative Council, or UVLC for short, is an organization of all the veterans organizations throughout the state of Nevada. That includes veterans, active duty military, National Guard, families, and advocates, and all those that are on this line and observing. And also, Anyway, I'm sure that many of you have veterans in your family history and they have direct experience of active duty military service. As we move forward, please remember them, the family sacrifices and commitment to serve our country, and how proudly you support them. All we want to do is the best for them. I'd like you to know that the UVLC supports SB 28 because we recognize that this is appropriate timing for updating the UVLC language. We believe it's very, very important to maintain safety and to maintain command and control throughout the organization. I can say that I have taught, trained, and adjudicated the DoD side of this process, as well as the corporate side of this. And there's many, many times that many people misunderstand this. It's not an easy understand, but when you're the victim, it's very easy to understand. And certainly I will tell you that for all intents and purposes, UVLC supports this bill. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Okay, opposition, please.
Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. Will you go to neutral?
Chair, the line is open and working, and you have no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. Lieutenant Colonel, do you have any final remarks?
One thing I would say, ma'am, is that we are, in front of the active duty by adding sexual harassment to our state military code already. I know when Senator Neal mentioned, that it's 2021. So we've taken that step before the active duty has. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And once again, I'll thank you both for your service and for being here today and being patient as we work through technology. And we look forward to working closely with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 28. And now we will go to Senate Bill 47. This measure revises provisions governing public borrowing. And Treasurer Conine, thank you for your patience. And please go ahead when you're ready.
Chair and committee members, thanks so much for having me today. I have the pleasure of being your Nevada State Treasurer. I'm here to present two bills, Senate Bill 47 and 68. Very excited about both of them. I do apologize that bill hearing you've got to get to at 5 o'clock. I've got to present at right after the governor. So I'm going to go pretty quick, but certainly if anybody has any questions, love to take them. And if we need to take them offline, also always happy to talk about these kinds of things. Going in order. Senate Bill 47, which is about interim debentures. In response to the devastating financial impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, during the 31st special session, the Nevada Legislature passed Senate Bill 4, SB 4. SB 4 permitted the State Board of Finance to issue interim debentures if the balance of the State General Fund was insufficient to meet future obligations. The provisions of SB 4 are set to expire on June 30th, 2021. Senate Bill 47 makes the provisions of SB 4 permanent and slightly modifies the process to ensure greater checks and balances. Upon expiration of SB 4, the state will have no mechanism or ability other than calling the legislature into special session to borrow money in an emergency. Senate Bill 47 puts a permanent tool in our toolbox. I don't think I'm supposed to say tool in our toolbox, but there it is, to address financial crises, whether caused by severe economic downturn, public health emergencies, or other extreme extenuating circumstances in which the state is unable to pay its bills. Nevada is one of only 4 states with a biennial budget process, including Montana, North Dakota, and Texas, which makes it challenging to respond efficiently and adequately to evolving financial conditions. Senate Bill 47 will provide the state with a level of flexibility to ensure that the general fund appropriations made by the legislature can be fulfilled in an economic downturn without taking significant losses in the state's investment portfolio. Senate Bill 47, much like Senate Bill 4 from the special session, permits the State Board of Finance to issue not more than $150 million in interim debentures through the following steps. Step 1, the state treasurer determines that the balance in the general fund is insufficient to meet future obligations. For the record, we forecast cash flow by day through 2027 at this stage. But of course, sometimes there are surprises like a pandemic. Step 2, the treasurer notifies the interim finance committee of the amount of the insufficiency and transmits a request to allow for the issuance by the State Board of Finance. And step 3, the interim finance committee has 15 days, like other emergency measures, to consider the item and deliver a resolution establishing the maximum amount that may be issued. If the interim finance committee does not meet within that 15-day timeline, the approval is automatically processed and the request is sent to the State Board of Finance. While it will only be used in limited emergency circumstances, we believe Senate Bill 47 is necessary to ensure the state has the tools it needs to respond effectively and efficiently in times of crisis. With that, happy to answer any questions on Senate Bill 47. I would say, though we didn't need to use the emergency measure during the time between the special session and now, which we're very, very grateful for, you don't put on a parachute expecting for the plane to crash. You put on a parachute in case it does. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from committee members? I believe
Madam Chair.
Senator Neal has a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will just get to, well, I have 2 questions, but the first one is, and I'm going to work backwards. So in Senate Bill 4 in the session, and I understand what you're trying to do, but the only reason why I voted for this in the special session is because we were in an emergency, never intending for this language to be permanent. So SB 47 makes a provision in SB 4 that basically allowed revenues to be pledged that was any unrestricted revenue, including tax revenue, to be pledged. And it was, and that was an issue for me because to me, that's an expansion of power, and the expansion of power to then be able to use the unrestricted revenue and including tax revenue, and it becomes automatic if IFC doesn't operate within the 15 days. It's just unworkable for me. Number one, because how do we know what those revenues are designated for, what we probably want to use them for without them being swiped? So that's I have a super problem with that. Second, I don't understand in section 2, the bill changed, it said it was a temporary change of bank service charges to bond administrative expenses. And so what I didn't understand was if SB 4, that was a temporary change, and then SB 47, you're switching it back. What was the effect of that language swapping? Because now the language says bond administrative expenses, but yet in the special, it was switched to bank service charge. I don't understand it. Help me understand why we needed to do that kind of wordsmithing.
Of course. Thank you, Senator, for the questions. So I'll take the first one, and then if I could ask Senior Deputy Tara Hagan to jump in on the second one on those specifics. But as it relates to the intention of that, the revenue language, the goal here is to have a mechanism to pay the bills that the legislature has already approved, right? And so when we're going to issue general obligation debt, that means it's becoming a general obligation of the state. And it could be a specific type of revenue, but if it doesn't become a specific type of revenue, then it's all of the revenue of the state, just like the rest of our bond issuances, right? They're based on property tax, but they're general obligation debt. So if property tax doesn't become sufficient, then we have to take the money from other revenue streams. The intention there isn't to pick and pull and the language doesn't pick and pull from some specific revenue stream. What it does is say that if we're going to issue an interim debenture, it, just like the rest of our general obligation debt, is based on the full faith and credit and ability to pay it back. And again, this is specifically for if the legislature approves an expense and then there's an emergency and we can't pay that bill, right? This is to be used for things like payroll. This is to be used like for paying the National Guard, right? When we don't have the opportunity to get in a special session. And cash crunches on this stage, we're one of the few states that doesn't have the ability to do something like this, which is even more concerning to us because we don't have a legislature that's in session all the time, right? So we can't just go down the hall and say, hey, folks, we're going to run out of money next Thursday. Could you do something? Everybody would have to get called in for an issuance. This isn't something IFC can do typically, which just as the financial steward of the state's bills, the person responsible for making sure that our checks don't bounce, terrifies me. I'll turn it over to Chief Deputy Hagan for the second question because I do not know the answer to that.
Good afternoon. Tara Hagan, Chief Deputy Treasurer. For the record, the bank assessment, that was simply just a technical change. When we had the language prior that said bank assessments, it was just dated in terms of the cost of issuance and all the different obligations that go into cost of issuances, such as bond counsel, disclosure counsel, state rating agencies, and other fees. So that was really just to align the statute with the current process today.
So thank you for that. Because if that's the case, then why are we flipping it back, I guess?
Tara Hagan, for the record. That's an excellent question. So we'll have to get with the legal division of LCB to understand that because that was not our intention. So we'll certainly reach out to them with that.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions, Senator Neal?
No, because we're running out of time. I mean, I put my opinions on the record. I don't like the permanency. So
okay, perfect. Thank you. Any Senator Gocochea, a question? I think you might be on mute.
I'm here. I'm sorry. Sometimes my space bar unmutes me and sometimes it doesn't. I'm just wondering why we deleted all the language as far as the parameters when the 25% its lowest average, 120 days, why we deleted all that, then turned it over and gave it to the State Board of Finance and the treasurer to determine that it was insufficient. And then the only real backstop to it is the fact that ultimately it will come to IFC, but if they don't act within 15 days, it's still approved. So technically it's still the State Board of Finance and or the state treasurer just determines that there isn't enough money and we don't really have any of the guidelines in place.
Treasurer Conine, for the record. So we put together the bill during the special session, obviously based on a relatively quick drafting process. And in that drafting process, we wanted to make sure that everyone was comfortable with kind of the limitations. With more time, we wanted to make sure that the bill worked in the way that we wanted it to, which was a parachute that could be pulled by the people looking at the bank accounts every day that could then go to IFC, make a case for that, and the IFC could handle it. Now, the great thing about this process is there are a couple of really significant guide rails on it. One is the legislature has to approve the spending. So this is spending that has been approved. This is payroll. This is, necessary things that you all have already approved through the budget process. And if for some reason there's a hold on revenues, right? Let's say that there was a 1-month delay on gaming revenues because there was a temporary moratorium put in place. Let's say there was a pandemic, right? And those revenues don't come in, but they're going to, or we have to repay live entertainment taxes like we did this time. If we didn't have the federal dollars in the bank account, we could run out of money. Right. And so the goal here is for us to be able to shoot up the warning flare, to know IFC is going to hear it within 15 days, because IFC has heard everything we've asked them to hear on an emergency measure within 15 days, and we've been able to work through it. And to make sure that then the State Board of Finance, who's responsible for issuing all debt from an approval standpoint, is still involved in that process. But the tick and tie here is the fact that it's only things that have been legislatively approved ahead of time. This doesn't create new spending. This makes sure we can pay the bills that we've already committed to.
Thank you, Treasurer Conan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from the committee? Okay, if not, we will go to hearing those wishing to testify in support. And I would remind anyone on the phone, 2 minutes, please. We are running short on time. And broadcasting, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Chair, your public line is open and working, and you have no callers in the queue at this time.
Thank you. And would that be for, can we go to opposition, please?
Yes, Chair, there are no callers in the queue at all.
Okay. Then we will pause for just a minute while we all get out Senate Bill 68. And if you have no other comments, Treasurer Conine, we will go on to Senate Bill 68.
Thank you, Chair. Moving into Senate Bill 68, if the last bill was a parachute, this is a lifeline and an opportunity to some of our struggling school districts. The Treasurer's Office is charged with a number of critical state functions, one of which is the responsibility of the investment of public monies. This includes all investment and accounting activities relating to the general portfolio, the local government investment pool, the permanent school fund, and the oversight of the Invest investment advisors. Now, I could talk about any of those for weeks, but since we don't have time, we'll skip right to the meat here. What Senate Bill 68 does is it modernizes and strengthens Nevada's current investment statutes by increasing the impact of the Nevada Capital Investment Corporation on public school funding, ensuring greater participation from local school districts, and expanding the state's investment vehicles. Senate Bill 68 accomplishes these goals by making the following changes. Number one, Section 2 of the bill increases the transfer from the Permanent School Fund to the Nevada Capital Investment Corporation from $50 million to $75 million to generate additional funding for public schools. The Nevada Capital Investment Corporation is administered by the State Treasurer's Office and operates through something called the Silver State Opportunity Fund. The Silver State Opportunity Fund invests dedicated capital in Nevada businesses and does so with the primary goal of generating greater returns for the state's permanent school fund. Silver State Opportunity Fund secondarily seeks to increase economic development and employment in the state. Under NRS 355-280, state treasurer is permitted to transfer up to $50 million from the permanent school fund to the Nevada Capital Investment Corporation. To date, these investments have generated $32.3 million for the permanent school fund and $12.8 million in interest payment directly to the distributive school account. Section 2 of the bill increases the amount of this transfer to $75 million, which will further increase investment returns to support funding public education in the state. Just a few snapshots of data here. During fiscal year 20, NCIC had net returns of 6.5% compared to the permanent school fund, which had net returns of 2.89%. In the last fiscal year, more than half of the interest paid into the DSA came from this Nevada Capital Investment Corp. It's an exceptionally good vehicle, and the more money, of course, we get into the distributive school account, the more money there is for things like teachers and class size reduction. Pivoting to the other sections of the bill, under existing law, school districts may apply to the Treasurer's Office for a guarantee agreement where money in the permanent school fund is used to back the payment of debt service on bonds that are issued for school construction. The state's larger school districts generally bond for new schools on their own. That's Clark, Washoe. However, this guarantee is critical for smaller, more rural districts to help finance school construction. Sections 3 and 4 of the bill increase the total amount by which the state treasurer can issue bonds that are guaranteed by the permanent school fund upon request from school districts from $40 million to $60 million. By increasing this cap, smaller school districts can greatly utilize the state's permanent school fund and encourage additional school construction in areas of need. Functionally, what this does is it allows us to use the state's very good credit rating to backstop school construction bonds in areas that don't have as great of a credit rating. And it allows them to borrow money more cheaply, which gives them the opportunity to build more things and spend more money on the stuff we all care about. Finally, Section 1 of the bill allows the office to invest in reverse repurchase agreements. In a reverse repurchase agreement, the state as the investor owns a security which a bank or dealer purchases under an agreement and sells back to the state at a specified date and at an agreed upon rate. Reverse repurchase agreements can be used as a cash management tool to help avoid liquidating security prior to its maturity date, in order to meet an unexpected or immediate cash flow requirement. It's a cash flow management tool. It also allows us to add a few points to our bottom line. This would provide the state with additional liquidity should the need arise for an overnight or ultra short-term loan. The agreements are highly regulated, performed by third-party custodians, and tailored to match the specifics of the state's statutorily required high-quality securities. Much like the changes of Senate Bill 47, these would be used in rare and extenuating circumstances. Excuse me. That concludes my presentation. I thank you for your time and consideration of both of our bills this afternoon. Happy to take any questions on Senate Bill 68.
Thank you very much, Treasurer Conine. Any questions from the committee?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Senator Neal, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll work backwards for the 60 million. So what schools are currently actively trying to use the bonds? I know historically there is a report that's listed and it lists all the schools by county, but what is currently happening in the space where we need to increase during a pandemic? And then I'll go to the reverse repurchase.
Perfect. Treasurer Conine, for the record. First off, and I think this is important, this doesn't cost the state any money, right? Not a single dime. These are refundings and other agreements that are made through those counties. They pay the cost of issuance. The state has absolutely no expense there, nor does it do anything when it comes to us from a budgetary perspective. Currently, 9 school districts have active permanent school fund guarantee debt totaling $161 million in total, and that includes Carson City, Churchill, Douglas County, Lincoln, Lyon, Nye, Story, White Pine, and Washoe has a little bit. We've saved about $11 million for those districts through this program.
And I guess I want to clarify something, because it's not that I think that it's costing the state anything. I feel like when I review the two bills together, although we closed the hearing on the other one, this is an expansion of power. I don't understand, and I guess maybe I'm uncomfortable because there's several asks. There's a specific ask in here. You're jumping for the 2 sections where you're asking for increased authority and increased money to act. I understand what they do, and it's not personal. I just feel like there are things that I'm uncomfortable with because I'm not understanding a $20 million jump here and then a $25 million jump there. I understand the permanent school fund performs very well. It had some rough years, 2011, 2013, and it's hit its sweet spot. But those are my issues, right? Expansion of power usually gives me pause for concern, no matter who it is that's asking. So I want to be clear on that. So let me just go to the repurchase, because it's like Groundhog Day. You know, I've seen this bill at least, or that concept at least 2 or 3 times. How about you talk about the disadvantages and the risks? Because there are some risks involved with repurchase agreements, and typically they're not used by governments. Yes, the Federal Reserve has used them, but typically we don't see a lot of engagement in state treasurer departments. We see it with the businesses and various tools in which they use this security. So why don't you talk about how the maturity date works and how we can run into a risk there with it maturing before it's due?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, thanks for the question. And if I could just briefly address the first part when it comes to expansion of responsibilities. I'm the fiduciary of the Permanent School Fund. I'm the person whose name is on the responsible documents. My office spends a lot of time making sure that as the fiduciary of the Permanent School Fund, it is taken care of. And part of that means having the tools available to it to make sure that it can grow and serve its purpose as a guarantee. And counties have come to us and asked us to expand this number so that, remember, this number hasn't changed in a number of years, even as the Permanent School Fund has grown, right? So we have additional capacity there, but we don't have any way to actually get it out on the street. And what we're encouraging these school districts to do, especially in time of crisis, is to look for ways to refinance existing debt at lower interest rates. They're able to do that, but they need access to the Permanent School Fund guarantee to do it. When it comes to expansion of powers and responsibilities, Senator, I hear you. This is an opportunity, and we think a good one, to make sure that the office works most effectively taking care of the state's money, which is what I do each and every day. When it comes to the reverse repurchase agreements, I'll turn it over to Chief Deputy Tara Hagan for specifics. But all investing has risks. The investments that we take in fixed income have risks. The investments we take in the permanent school fund and NCIC has risks. The goal of a program like this is to mitigate those risks and make sure that you're getting securities that don't have a maturity date prior to the end of the reverse repurchase contract. I've never heard of that happening to an institution that does it at our level and with our level of control over the actual securitization. Happy to pass it over to Chief Deputy Tara Hagan if I'm missing anything there.
Good afternoon. Tara Hagan again for the record with the Treasurer's Office. I think just a couple of things. When it comes to the reverse repurchase agreements, back in the past, in the 80s, it was used not as a liquidity tool, but as a way to enhance performance on a portfolio. And so we've seen that, yes, that is absolutely a risk that's associated with it. But using it as a cash management or a liquidity tool to as we pointed out, an effort not to sell a security early at a detriment to the portfolio, that is actually, you can mitigate that risk by just using it for that purpose. And then also a few things, you utilize a third-party custodian. In addition, most importantly, probably, just like we do with the repurchase agreements that we do every day, they're very, very short time frames. They're either overnight or a maximum of, say, 5 to 7 days. And that's the other way that you can mitigate the risk associated with these type of agreements.
Thank you very much. And I apologize for the interruption. I'm going to hand the gavel over to the Vice Chair as Senator Gocochea and I need to excuse ourselves to go to a finance meeting. And Treasurer Conine, thank you for your patience today as we work through all these bills. I know that you need to be in the same meeting in a few minutes. So Vice Chair Orenshaw, thank you very much. And thank you to the staff.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Have a good meeting. Members, any additional questions on Senate Bill 68 for our State Treasurer or his Chief Deputy?
So, Vice Chair, I know there's like 4 minutes and there's a meeting getting ready to kick off. I just have one last question on the reverse repurchasing. Can you explain the interest? Are you getting interest or how does it work? I mean, I know how it works, but I think this is a concept. I don't know if it's ever made it to the Senate side.
Treasurer Conine, for the record, I don't know that it has either. I know former Assemblyman Kramer was a big fan and brought it up occasionally. Chief Deputy Hagan.
Tara Hagan again for the record. In terms of the interest, that's part of that agreement that, like I said, there's standardized agreements that are used in the securities world for these, but the interest would go to the other party in terms of a reverse repurchase agreement, because it is the state in an emergency would be utilizing it for a liquid terms in terms of having that cash available. So we would need the cash. We would send the securities as a basket of securities that would be the collateral. And so the interest would be derived from the other party that is taking possession of those securities.
Thank you, Vice Chair Orenshaw.
Thank you. Any further questions, Senator Neal?
No, it's time for everybody, for them to get to the other meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any members, any additional questions? I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you, Treasurer Conine, and thank you, Chief Deputy Hagan. We will now, and I appreciate you have to go to the next meeting, and thank you very much for your time this evening.
Of course, Treasurer Conine, for the record, I just wanted to offer for any member, I know we're moving pretty quick here. These are big, important things. Love to chat about it offline and answer any questions. Want to make sure everybody can get comfortable on what we think are pretty important tools for the state. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, and appreciate your willingness to chat with senators offline and answer any questions. Next, I'd like to move to anyone else wishing to speak in support, if there's any testimony in support.
Vice Chair, you have no callers in your queue at this time.
Thank you, broadcasting. Next, Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 68?
Vice Chair, your line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Next, is there anyone on the line who wishes to speak in the neutral position on Senate Bill 68?
There are no callers in the queue at this time.
Thank you, broadcasting. I would like to close the hearing on Senate Bill 68, and I'd now like to move to the last item on our agenda, that's public comment. We are going to wait just a minute to give members of the public a chance to call in. Members of the public who wish to make public comment at this hearing, please remember to clearly state and spell your name. We are asking that you limit your comments to 2 minutes. Each speaker will be timed to ensure everyone is given a fair opportunity to speak. If you don't have enough time, you may also submit public comment in writing. So we'll just give a minute to broadcasting.
Vice Chair, your line is open and working, and you have no one for public comment at this time.
Right, not seeing anyone who wishes to make public comment today. Thank all the members for their excellent questions. Thank our presenters today, and thank broadcasting and staff for making this meeting work with all the technology. And we will be adjourning. Thank you very much, members.